Hello, and welcome to the third lecture in the case study about culture and landscape for the Who Do You Think You Are module. This week, we're going to be looking at American intervention and capitalist organizations and how they systematically stripped what little resources were left in Honduras after the end of the colonial period. So, to begin with, I want to outline what a banana republic is, as it is not uh, a phrase perhaps you are familiar with. The term was created in 1904 specifically to describe what had happened in Honduras. And I'll outline to you in this lecture what does happen in Honduras. However, this is a model and an economic principle that can be applied to lots of different countries. It's merely that Honduras is seen as one of the first examples of it. So, what a banana republic is known as is a politically unstable country with an economy that is dependent upon the exportation of a limited resource or product. And that limited resource or product from that country is often controlled by an external source. An external source that gives power to the political elite in that country. And banana republics are essentially what happens is they essentially create a two-class system. Um, in Honduras, these days, what you have is essentially a poverty stricken majority at the bottom of society, and then an incredibly wealthy minority in charge of the resources and means of production of the country. There is next to no middle class in Honduras or other countries that have become to be known as a banana republic because the money that this minority control is not invested into public services but stays in the hands of private investors and politicians, which creates a currency that is almost valueless and uneven economic development. And that is still true today in Honduras. So the economy we see there today is really rooted in this banana republic that forms after the colonial period we discussed in the last lecture is over. And I'm not going to focus on filling in the gaps of where we left off and the start of the 20th century. I'm going to skip over it a little bit, but what you need to know is after Honduras and the rest of the Latin American countries gain independence in around 1821, um, they struggle to create a constitution that works. Initially, what you have is something called the United Provinces, which is the five countries below Mexico in some sort of EU style economic and political alliance. So you have Guatemala, Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, and Costa Rica form the United Provinces. However, they struggle to create a constitution because they are all trying to be the dominant country within that united economic system. And this leads to constant war between the countries. And it doesn't work and it fails. So each of those five countries becomes completely politically separate. However, there is a constant friction that emerges along the borders of these countries. Even when I was there in 2013, there was trouble along the Honduras El Salvador border. So it's an incredibly politically and economically unstable region of the world because all of the resources have been taken during the colonial period. And Honduras is especially um, tumultuous because it borders three different countries in Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Guatemala. So all three of the borders are incredibly politically disruptive. And initially, there is quite a strong liberal progressive movement that you see in Honduras. However, a civil war emerges between liberals and conservatives about how the country should move forward, and actually a Guatemalan backed conservative coup takes place in 1856. And as a result of that, the country remains socially conservative even to this day. The Liberal Party of Honduras, by British standards, is remarkably conservative still. And throughout the whole of the 19th century, the economy of Honduras remains heavily dependent on tobacco exportation, cattle, and agriculture, and limited mining. As we discussed in the last lecture, the mines are almost completely, everything worth of value from the mines are taken by the Spanish or the British. So the economy doesn't expand at all in this time period. The agriculture and the cattle and tobacco industries are not lucrative, and they continue to have to loan money from foreign nations to try and re-stimulate their economy. So external of debt from Honduras remains incredibly high. And at times, Britain invades Honduras to regain some of its money. So, as you can see, because of what's been taken out of the landscape, the economy of Honduras stagnates, politically, socially, tumultuous. So that's what happens in the 19th century. It's much more complicated than that, but I wanted to give you the overarching themes. But towards the end of the 19th century, bananas become incredibly popular in America and in Europe. And bananas, the climate to grow bananas is perfect in the Caribbean. So that's another important element of how the landscape shapes what happens in 20th century Honduras. And why there is a move towards bananas in America specifically is how much cheaper they can be produced for, especially when you grow them in Latin America. Compared to apples, which were naturally grown in America, they are much cheaper and they become a popular source of nutrition for the working class in the southern states of America. And really importantly, to understand what happens is in this time period is that slavery is abolished in America. And as a result of that, people need new sources of income. And what happens? You get these rich white Southern men looking for new sources of income. And Lorenzo Baker, who I've got on the left hand of this screen, buys a plot of land in Jamaica where he grows bananas and he sells them for 1,000% profit in Boston. Because although slavery has been abolished, he can pay Latin American workers next to nothing and then sell the cheap products he grows there for a big profit. And these plantation owners, these fruit growers, strike up alliances with transportation investors, especially railway owners, railway tycoons like Henry Meigs and Minor Keith. Henry Meigs, who I've included on the right, Minor Keith, who I've included on the right hand of the screen, begin to offer to build railways to the governments in Latin America. Now, as a result of this economically productive system, railway owners and fruit plantation owners begin to take up large percents of the countryside in Latin America. In fact, by the turn of the 20th century, over 50% of Honduras is owned by foreign investors. And as a result of that, they have the power. The big company that in Honduras specifically that is most influential is known as the Standard Fruit Company. And that is started by the Vaccaro brothers, who in 1889 leave New Orleans and begin to buy huge areas of Honduras, forcing local agricultural business owners out of their own country. And in fact, the Vaccaro brothers don't like using Honduran labor because there isn't a good standard of English within them. So they start moving people from Jamaica and the West Indies. So you have this enormous demographic shift that takes place in Honduras, which shapes the culture as well. So a number of these a number of smaller fruit companies, like the United Fruit Company, like the Q Miel Fruit Company, start to align with each other and create these enormous conglomerate multinational um, big companies, and they literally dictate the entire political climate in Honduras for the rest of the 20th century and to this day. It is remarkable how much power these companies have. And the real first sign of their growing influence on politics rather than simply the economy is the 1902 Honduran election and the democratically elected Manuel Bonilla. And the reason Bonilla gets elected in is because he accepts vast amounts of money from the fruit companies in exchange for his political support. So they give him lots of money. He can run an effective political campaign. He gets voted in. And once he is voted in, he completely abolishes tax for fruit and railway companies. They don't have to pay any tax at all. He reduces minimum wage. He allows them to buy up large parts of the country. They give him money. And this creates an incredibly weak political system where the politicians owe their position of power to companies. And Bonilla essentially becomes an authoritarian. Um, from with the money that he receives from the United Fruit Company, he creates a military state. And this really never goes away. The military are an enormous presence in Honduras to this day because these weak political leaders need a strong military to keep them in power. And the politicians and the military owe their power to these big American companies. And the National Party of Honduras, which is in power today, was literally formed by Bonilla. So you can see how much power they have and how they've been able to keep it as well. And he changes the constitution of Honduras to suit himself and these companies. But of course, this is incredibly unpopular with the population of Honduras who've been forced out of work and been replaced with cheaper labor from Jamaica. They don't own their land. There's no job opportunities from them. There's a military dictatorship that essentially can do and behave however they want, completely corrupt. And Latin America and Honduras specifically remains incredibly socially disruptive throughout this time period as the people of Honduras fight against this repressive system. But America, whose economy is expanding because of these companies, backs these corrupt presidents and politicians who are going to support American economic interests. And as you can see on this slide, America sends Navy SEALs and uses CIA information to support military coups and put down revolutions in Honduras in 1903, 1907, 1911, 1912, 1919, 1924, and 1925 to maintain peace. So America is intricately linked to the politics of Honduras and maintaining this corrupt system that has emerged there. And in fact, in the 1912 intervention, General Lee Christmas, who I'm slightly cutting their head off in this on this slide, oversees a military coup of a leader who turned against American businesses. So when a politician doesn't support the corrupt system, America simply overthrows them. And this continues as late as 2009 when Obama backed a Honduran leader and overthrew the democratically elected one. This process has been described as neo-colonialism. So, because of international law, one country cannot, in theory, politically take over another country. They can't invade and simply um, take over a country. But what America does and what Russia does in a lot of the eastern states, they economically control a country. And when military forces are sent in, it is seen as maintaining peace. So it is called neo-colonialism. It is a new form of controlling countries. And Honduras and the other countries of Latin America have very little autonomy to do anything about it. And it's why we see such levels of violence in these countries to this day. Um, in 1999, there's a civil war over this issue um, and fighting against the American backed military dictatorship. But America constantly finds new ways of suppressing the population. And in World Wars One and World War Two, Honduras is forced to declare war on Germany and they send people from Honduras to fight in these global conflicts. So, as you can imagine, the people of Honduras have very, very little power at all. And in 1920, America places a warship along the northern border of Honduras to maintain order. And there is always a military presence in the Caribbean Ocean. And as I've said, this continues throughout the 20th century, where the presidents of Honduras are essentially puppets to American corporations, and they are backed by the military. But it is not just Honduras where this happens. What's really important is it happens in all of the countries of Latin America below Mexico. So El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Guatemala have exactly the same things happening. And because Honduras borders all three of those countries and has border disputes with those countries, it creates an incredibly unstable social and political scene. Guatemala has a 36-year civil war between 1960 and 1996, backed by the CIA and Navy SEALs. So it's not just Honduras that is unstable, every single country that borders Honduras is unstable. And there are a series of invasions from various forces that surround Honduras. So, meanwhile, whilst the banana industry is booming, no one and the everyday people of Honduras have no access to it and are usually engaged in either a civil war or a war with another country. And the best example of how unstable the social climate is for me, is the 1969 football war that breaks out between El Salvador and Honduras. Violence between El Salvador and Honduran fans at a World Cup qualifier breaks out into a literal war between El Salvador and Honduras. So, on my other module a few weeks ago, I discussed football hooliganism. This was an actual war based around a World Cup qualifier, which goes to show how unstable the region had become. And it is all driven by American backed anti Latin American propaganda, which we still see in politics now. The idea that Latin Americans are lawless and unstable people, but so much of this hyper masculine, aggressive, warlike culture has been brewed by American corporations. And to try and stabilize the increasingly um, disruptive populations of these countries, these Latin American countries, including Honduras, have to keep increasing the money they invest in their local militias. over 56% of Hondurans' entire annual budget is spent on the police force. And this police force are corrupt and allow the drug and cocaine trade to take place. So hopefully, as you can see, all of this stems from the creation of a banana republic, which is America exploiting the post-colonial instability. However, as time goes on, what the produce of Honduras is changes drastically. It is much less about bananas these days. As I've got on this side, in the 1970s, there is a series of hurricanes that destroy the Honduran banana plantations, and the natural environment and the amount of natural disasters that happen in Honduras really is a problem in terms of the economy and politics advancing and changing. And I'll talk more about natural disasters in the next lecture. But bananas become the less important export. And really, these days, it is more coffee um, producers and coffee corporations who dictate the politics of Honduras. So fair trade is often seen as a very ethical group. However, they pay their workers very little money and sell coffee for huge amounts in America and Europe. So fair trade, whilst marginally better than the Banana Republic, still behave in a similar manner, and they own huge areas of forests and coffee plantations, which means it is out of the hands of the local people. The other big company that dictates politics in Honduras is Nestle, which owns companies like Coca-Cola, and they have bought enormous water supplies in Honduras. It takes 2 liters of water to create 1 liter of Coca-Cola. And the water supplies have literally been purchased by Nestle and are owned by them and out of the hands of the public. And the other big one is timber companies. And I'll talk more about timber companies next week. But these companies literally and metaphorically own Honduras. I've included on this slide on the right, Coca-Cola has a number of almost Hollywood style signs outside of Tegucigalpa and San Pedro Sula, which really acts as a metaphor for how these companies are behaving, looming down on the Honduran population. But they're brilliant at rebranding themselves and portraying themselves as ethical. Fair Trade do campaigns where they talk about how they're getting gang members out of crime and into coffee production. But there's still this uneven system that exists there because the companies own so much of the land. And even modern day companies, innocuous companies, you would think, like the Chiquita Banana Company, who you will recognize from selling bananas in local shops. It is the same United Fruit Company that was established that I highlighted earlier in this lecture. So they rebrand themselves, but there are really insidious undertones to the control they have over Honduras and the natural resources of Honduras being owned by um, external parties and companies means that the culture of Honduras and the political cultures of Honduras are dictated to from these external sources. So I've put my major concluding points on this slide that you can pause and look at later. But before you come to the seminar, I'd like you to read the article Crown Colony as Banana Republic, the United Fruit Company in British Honduras, 1900 to 1920. That's written by Mark Moberg. It's available on JSTOR through the Journal of Latin American Studies, volume 28, number 2, pages 357 to 381. I'll put that link on Moodle, though. And I want you to think about the following questions. One, why were companies able to become so powerful in Honduras in the late 19th and early 20th century? And what were the cultural impact of that? Two, what were the long-term political, social, economic effects of being a banana republic? Three, what is neo-colonialism? How is it different from previous forms of colonialism? And four, are modern companies still guilty of participating in a banana republic? So we look forward to speaking to you about these very modern and relevant issues in the seminar. Thank you.